Hello everyone and welcome to a new video from Your Overwatch. I'm Eddie the Chump and today we're going to be talking about Roadhog. For the purposes of demonstration, we'll be using a few clips from the streamer Harbleu, who is a top 500 off-tank player but well known for being a complete beast on Roadhog. Me and FREEDO actually got to meet him at the Overwatch League finals in New York last year, and he's a really nice guy and obviously a fantastic player. His stream link and social media will be in the description below, so please do go and check him out and give him some love. He deserves it. So let's begin by talking about the changes to Roadhog, the changes around him meta-wise, and why you should think about picking him up as a character for your hero pool. Hog is a beneficiary of the overall nerf to armor on the PTR, meaning with headshots he can see some serious damage improvement, and he also can take advantage of the nerf to D.Va's defense matrix. Hog could already hook her through it, obviously, but depending on range, she could recover in time to block your follow-up shot. This is no longer the case, meaning when combined with extra damage to headshots on armored targets, Hog is a serious threat to D.Va and other armored tanks. Also, Brig will survive being hooked much less frequently when those armor changes do go through. These are just some of the reasons why you should start thinking of picking him up again. He's already good and is about to be getting better. But we've already covered most of that info in other videos. The reason we're here today is to look at some core Hog skills that a player like Harbleu has and how you can incorporate them into your own game to help you improve. The first skill we're going to cover today is how a lot of pros aim to hit more hooks, which leads to much more efficient damage output. If you're playing Hog and your hook accuracy percentage is very high, chances are you're getting huge value. So one tendency lower level Hog players have is to just try and hit hooks raw. See a target, aim at them, hit the button. Well, Harbleu uses a different method most of the time. What he and other top players do is use a pre-fire right click into trying to hit a hook. I say right click, that's a range dependent factor. At shorter range, using his regular shot will work just as well. This serves two purposes. Firstly, it acts as a kind of tracer round, whereby you give yourself more time to line up the hook by getting your reticle on or near them before committing to the cooldown, making the actual skill shot easier. And secondly, if you do land damage with this pre-fire, it helps guarantee that insta-kill on a squishy post-hook. Hands up anyone who's hooked, say, a Zen and had them inexplicably survive what felt like a full shot afterwards. Yeah, just about every Hog player ever. What can also help is the quick melee right after the follow-up shot as well, another habit you should get yourself into. On non-squishies like a tank with lots of armor, this pre-fire can help you punch through to the white health underneath post-hook, as currently the max you can do on an armored target, even with every pellet hitting their head hitbox, is 175. Orisa and D.Va have 200, so a chunky right click before you hit them with a hook and a follow-up will really help. This is going to change with the nerf to armor, with a full headshot doing 225, but developing this habit will not only help you hit more hooks, but also just net you more overall damage. Now, there is another technique Harbleu uses to hit more hooks that stands outside the realm of incredible flick shots, which is very capable of hitting, but might be beyond your average player, and that's how he uses map lanes and angles to secure high percentage easy confirms. When pushing a cart through a tight part of the map, or it otherwise funnels targets into having to move through a narrow area, Harbleu often takes advantage by firing a hook into a lane and knowing with a good amount of certainty it will register onto at least something and bring it into him and his team for focus. Try to think of this like how Hanzo uses a similar technique for landing headshots. You're putting the hook into a high traffic area that at certain phases of maps your opponents have to stand in. There's lots of easy value to get with this, and all it takes is good reading of enemy movement, the state of their shield if in fact they do have one, and where the stragglers might be moving. The next part of Harbleu's Hog game that I want to bring attention to is how he uses hook and then a sideways drag to put opponents in a much worse position. This can land environmental kills, which is a great way to basically insta-kill any target of any size, including the fattest of tanks on maps like Ilios Well or Nepal Sanctum, but it's also useful to drag a target more into your team if you're just on regular ground. However, if you hook a main tank and turn, instead of it being just in front of you, they're now in front of everyone who's behind you as well, which gives them a much harder job of escaping focus. Chances are that unless a target has mad mobility, and sometimes even with that, they're as good as dead, which can be a massive upside for your team. Demeching a D.Va early in a fight opens up so much potential for other ultimates and abilities your team might want to use, that she can put a stop to through defense matrix, including your own ult, but more on that later. So now that you're learning to hit more hooks through those techniques, how can you get the most out of your damage? Well, Harbleu is actually really good with just Hog's shotgun, both post-hook and in general play, and that's kind of a secret to his success with the character. The more you get done without the hook, the more impact you're going to have overall. Let's cover post-hook first. So what you want to internalize is that on smaller targets, you really want to be hitting as many of his 25 pellets as possible. That means, oddly enough, that aiming directly at their head is not always a good idea, as if you aim high on a small target, pellets can easily miss and you might not secure the kill. Hook targets also don't come quite as close to you as they did in previous patches, so this is especially important as Hog's spread gets quite wide quite quickly. On a tank with a head hitbox the size of the moon, this is slightly different, as with all likelihood most of your pellets will hit if you're aiming a little bit higher. And remember, the quick melee afterwards is absolutely essential. So the flow is shoot, hook, shoot, melee. That will give you the best chance of killing a target post-hook, and it should be your default approach. One quick note, this requires you to be on top of your ammo count, as you don't want the dreaded successful hook on a key target into having to reload. That's heartbreaking. But what about Hog's shotgun in general play? Well, Harbleu is really good with it because he understands how spread and distance affects its output. As I said before, the spread pattern gets very wide given just a few meters on his left click, so if the target is smaller, you have to be closer to be hitting value damage. Most of the time, the best approach is to just go for center mass, to be hitting as many of those pellets as possible. The bigger the target, the more license you have for trying to hit those money headshots. Some heroes are so short, you can kind of be aiming down a bit and still hit the head. Tracer is a very good example of this. Now, I find a reticle close to Hog's default to be useful for spread weapons, as they help me hit center mass easier, but Harbleu uses a much smaller circle reticle closer to Zen's, and I think that the better player you are, the smaller you can go. It is preference at the end of the day, but always remember, it's not going to be one-to-one anyway. The spread will be much wider most of the time, no matter what your reticle. Now let's talk about his right click. This is the distance where you can one-shot a squishy. It's also the distance where you'll do maximum damage to things like shields and barriers. The thing is, the right click expands in spread rapidly too, so hitting this magical zone where all the pellets are compressed into a tiny ball on a moving target's head is quite difficult. Not impossible, obviously, but it does require practice. What it is great for is breaking shields, and thankfully, those tend to be quite big, so there is some leeway in the distance management aspect of using it. At the start, using the right click to trace around before you hook a target is a good way of understanding where it is really practical as a damage tool. Because as a spam weapon, nobody really wants to continually walk into a Hog right clicking at the correct distance into a choke as they try and make it past. And speaking of people trying to move past you, let's talk about Roadhog and flanking. Now, this is a tricky subject because flanking is a core part of Hog's game, but it's also one of the best ways to throw with him if you get it wrong. There are plenty of times when you absolutely need to be with your team, breaking shields, looking for halt hooks with a reset, etc. But Hog can be played in a very deathmatchy way to great effect, and this is where flanking will help you. Watching Harbleu, there are times when he decides to flank in search of value, and it really pays off. One area or phase of a fight that can be exploited is when the enemy is trying to regroup after losing a team fight. Very few players understand it's good to all die at the same time to not get staggered, so the result is there are people waiting around for their team out of spawn and usually not in a very safe place. This is a golden opportunity for Hog to flank, secure a kill and stagger a team even more. Harbleu does this all the time, but he also does it after a fight has broken out to catch DPS or healers who might be tunnel visioning on doing their jobs facing forwards and not looking out for their sides. This is risky because obviously he's not with the rest of his team on the front line. If you do decide to do this, you had better get serious value or your team will not thank you for it. Flanking is always a judgment of risk versus reward, so the more you can minimize your own risk while not limiting the opportunity for value, the better. Take a breather is your escape option, so if you're flanking and getting anti-naded and focused too much, it's time to stop and learn when to time your peaks better. Let's move on to Hog's ultimate. Now, I've watched Harbleu quite a lot, and if there's one constant in his ult use, it's almost always post-successful hook. Now, we all implicitly understand the ultimate's weaknesses at this point in the game's life. You can get stunned out of it, it can be eaten by defense matrix largely, you can't heal yourself for a long time once you've started, etc. But it can get value, and one thing it's really good at is displacement. Whole Hog will push back any target it's hitting quite severely. This opens up quite a few opportunities. Firstly, you can use it to juggle an opponent, like top tier Winstons do with Primal Rage. If you push a target upwards and they hit a wall, or even better, a corner, they can't do anything about it, and if you don't get interrupted, they're probably gonna die. This is also useful to push targets away from a cart in overtime, or deny Genji a blade play of the game as you push him back, at least until he reflects, or say a Rhine pinning at your main tank, etc. Don't underestimate where you can put your opponents with Whole Hog. It can also combo with something like Zarya's Grab very effectively, as they're already stuck in place and they just have to stand there and eat the damage. By the way, that's quite a lot. It will very quickly chew through barriers and bubbles, so don't hesitate to use it if they're in your way. The things you do have to look out for are your own health when activating it, and key enemy cooldowns like Defense Matrix or Brig Stun. If your opponents have just used them and you've hit a big hook, it might be time to go all in. So for the last part, I couldn't make a video about Roadhog and not mention his best synergies. The Orisa Hog combo can be absolutely devastating, particularly on maps where Orisa's Halt already gets value. Now, despite this synergy being really good, in a lot of matches where people try and play it, there's not an awful lot of Halt hooking going on until you start to get up to the higher ranks. Harbleu is in constant communication with his Orisa, as the hook and Halt cooldowns need to be as in sync as possible, which is manageable because they're both 8 seconds. To actually hit these hooks, you need to aim at the green Halt projectile as it's activated. A lot of players that try this and don't get it to work, I think, are aiming at the enemy models as they move quite quickly. You don't need to. Once you get used to this, you'll be Halt hooking to your heart's content. The last synergy I want to talk about is just how good Lucio is for Roadhog. That shouldn't be a surprise. Lucio is amazing for any comp that wants to brawl, but what Lucio's speed does for Hog is allow him to get in and out of flank spots much quicker than opponents can be ready for, which is important because flanking is a big part of Hog's game, like I mentioned, as long as you don't fall into the pitfalls we talked about. Now, at Harbleu's level, up at the misty snow-capped peaks of top 500, Lucio is in pretty much every game, so it's easier for him to coordinate this synergy. At lower levels, you're much less likely to have a Lucio, even if you're trying to play a brawl comp. But don't underestimate how a fast-moving Hog can carry a game. If you duo or trio with friends, try it out. You could carve out value you wouldn't normally have access to. And that's about it for today's video. Once again, I highly recommend you go and check out Harbleu's stream. It is in the description. He's a top player, and if Hog isn't your thing, he plays a lot of the other off tanks too, including Zarya, D.Va, and Hammond, so get yourself over there and do show him some love. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to leave a rating. If you never want to miss another video of ours again, please click the bell icon next to the subscribe button on our channel to join the notification squad. You'll be in great company. And finally, please follow the Your Overwatch Twitter. It's where you can find updates about new videos and other cool stuff. I've been Eddie the Chump, and until next time,